Tonight, detectives in Fitchburg have some satisfaction in finally seeing a man charged in the murder of a boy whose body was found on the side of the road in a suitcase.
Investigators making a sad discovery along Route 190 in Sterling, finding what they believe is the body of a boy missing for months.
April 18, 2014, cars rushed down Interstate 190 in Sterling, Massachusetts. Drivers focused on their destinations, unaware of what sat just beyond the guardrail. Hidden in the brush was a suitcase. At first glance, it looked ordinary, the kind of thing you might mistake for lost luggage. But inside was something no one could have imagined. Inside was the answer to a mystery that had haunted an entire community for months. What happened to 5-year-old Jeremiah Oliver? Jeremiah had disappeared the previous fall. His absence raised quiet questions. Why wasn't he in school? Why had neighbors stopped seeing him outside? Why did no one seem to notice for so long? Families whispered. Teachers worried. But no alarms were sounded in time. The silence grew heavier with each passing week. When investigators finally opened that suitcase, the truth hit like a crushing weight. It wasn't filled with clothes. It wasn't a traveler's bag lost on the highway. It carried something far darker, a truth that should have been uncovered long before, a truth that showed not only what happened to a little boy, but also how badly the system had failed him. This wasn't a case of a child wandering off or slipping away by accident. This was darker. A child vanished from his own home, from his own family, while the very systems meant to protect him stayed silent until it was far too late. For his father, the loss was unbearable. For his community, it was devastating. And for all of us who hear his story today, it forces us to face a painful reality. Sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from within the very circle of trust. Before we continue, a quick note. This case involves the tragic loss of a child. While no graphic details will be shared, the subject matter may still be upsetting. And before we go deeper, thank you to our community members for recommending this case. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. For those returning, thank you for liking, sharing, and keeping these stories alive. Your support helps shine light on cases that demand accountability and change. So how did the life of a 5-year-old boy spiral from innocent playtime to a suitcase hidden on the side of a highway? To understand, we must go back to the boy himself, his family, and the warning signs so many people missed. Jeremiah Oliver was born in December 2008 in New Britain, Connecticut, to Jose Oliver and Elsa Oliver. From the start, people described him as gentle and playful. He loved toy cars, spent hours outside, and like many children, he adored a superhero. For Jeremiah, it was Spider-Man. When grown-ups asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, his answer was always the same: a police officer. Home life revolved around his siblings. Jeremiah was the middle child, with an older sister, Juliana, 8 years old in 2013, and a younger brother. The three were close in age, sharing toys, games, and the little routines that made up everyday family life. Relatives remember Jeremiah as quick to smile, eager to join in, a child who followed his sister's lead, but was starting to find his own voice. In 2013, the family left Connecticut and moved to Fitchburg, Massachusetts. For Jeremiah, just 5 years old, it was a big change, a new home, a new city, and the start of school routines. At that age, children begin to shape their world through classrooms, playgrounds, and neighborhood sidewalks. Jeremiah was learning letters, classroom rules, and the simple rhythm of school life. For a boy who loved superheroes and toy cars, Fitchburg brought new surroundings, but the same small joys. Morning cartoons before school, shared family meals, birthdays and holidays to look forward to. People who knew Jeremiah remember the everyday things, not grand moments. He was the child who wanted to carry grocery bags, even if they were too heavy. The one who crouched on the floor rolling toy cars in circles. The boy who sought approval from his sister or from adults with a hopeful look. And when asked to tidy up, he tried, sometimes slowly, sometimes distracted, but he always tried. That is the picture that emerges, a 5-year-old with ordinary habits and big dreams. Like many children his age, he tied his world to simple anchors, his favorite superhero, a few beloved toys, and the comfort of family. Jeremiah wore his Spider-Man fandom proudly. He loved playing outside when the weather allowed. He talked about one day wearing a uniform and helping people as a police officer. These small details show us who he was before tragedy struck. They remind us of what was lost. A little boy just beginning his school years with so many firsts ahead of him. His first library card, his first field trip, his first bike ride without training wheels. This background matters because it shows what was at stake. A child's ordinary life. No headlines, no legal terms, just a boy learning how to be part of a family, a classroom, and a community. Jeremiah's parents, Jose and Elsa, were no longer together during these years. Custody records placed the children primarily with their mother, Elsa. In 2011, a court granted Elsa a restraining order against Jose. That order shaped daily life. Most contact with the children went through Elsa, and she made the decisions about routines, discipline, and who spent time with them. By 2013, Elsa had entered a new relationship with Alberto Sierra Jr. He was in his early 20s, and according to past court records, he already had a history of violence, including assaults and threats. None of those earlier incidents involved Jeremiah, but they give us critical context for understanding the risk that would soon surround this little boy. Within months of the relationship starting, Sierra's presence in the home grew. He began spending more time with the family. Later statements say he started setting rules and enforcing them. In practice, a young boyfriend, not a long-standing parent, had become the main disciplinarian in the house. At first, the change was small. New adults join families all the time, and most mean well. That is why this case cuts so deep. Nothing in the early public facts would have warned an outside observer that danger was coming, but behind the closed door, the balance of power was shifting. The trusted circle grew to include a partner with a known record of aggression. That shift changed the daily life of a 5-year-old. This is where the betrayal of trust becomes the central theme. Jeremiah was not put at risk by strangers. The threat that later showed up in court records and police complaints grew from inside the circle that was supposed to protect him. When a new partner takes on authority in a home, responsibility follows. It also brings risk that must be managed with clear boundaries, outside oversight, and honest attention to past behavior. In this case, the balance tilted toward control and fear instead of safety and support. The why matters as much as the who. A parent under stress may welcome help with discipline. A partner eager to bring order may step into that gap quickly. Without guardrails, that arrangement can harden into a pattern where an adult with a violent past becomes the chief arbiter of rules for vulnerable children. This is not an abstract warning. Child safety research shows it is a real risk, especially when a non-biological adult gains rapid authority in the home. By early 2013, Elsa had primary custody. A new partner with a violent history had growing access and authority, and a 5-year-old's daily life was being reshaped by the decisions of adults. But there was more to the story. Back in 2011, child protection authorities in Connecticut had opened a neglect case involving the household. Social workers met the family, arranged services, and started a paper trail of referrals and notes. Then in January 2013, the family moved to Massachusetts. The case transferred to the Department of Children and Families, North Central Area Office that serves Fitchburg. A new social worker took over. According to later reviews, that worker read the transfer summary but did not review the full case history. The supervisor later said the same. That omission mattered. It left out critical context. Past concerns, earlier referrals, and risk patterns never fully informed the new team's decisions. Policy required regular in-person checks for open cases, but in the first half of 2013, those visits did not happen as they should have. The record shows multiple missed monthly contacts, 8 missed opportunities in all. Visits were inconsistent and incomplete. A home visit that should have happened in January did not. 2 visits took place in February and none in March. In April, a visit was recorded, but the worker only observed the children and did not speak to them privately. During that April visit, the mother mentioned the children might travel to Florida to stay with a relative for the summer. That plan was never confirmed. No travel details were verified. No receiving caregiver was contacted. For a family with an active case file, that kind of statement should have sparked a checklist, names, addresses, dates, and a follow-up plan. It did not. In May 2013, a mandatory reporter raised a red flag. Staff at Rangold Elementary School in Fitchburg received a disclosure from one of the children about being struck with a belt. The report went to DCF, and an investigator met with the mother and with Jeremiah at their apartment. The mother said she was already using services outside DCF, and that counseling and supports were being handled independently. The investigator wrote down the contact and the mother's statements. That May visit became a critical timestamp. It was the last documented time child welfare personnel saw Jeremiah. On May 20th, 2013, he was observed in the home. After that date, required contacts fell off again. No later visit verified his well-being. No follow-up confirmed whether the Florida plan was real or whether outside services were active. Case notes did not show the usual closed-loop checks, school attendance, pediatric visits, or collateral interviews that would help confirm a child's safety. The timeline is stark. A known case moved across state lines in January. 8 required monthly checks were missed or only partly completed in the months that followed. A teacher's report in May led to a short burst of activity, then oversight receded again. At each step, a safeguard was there, a full file review, private interviews, travel verification, and at each step it was unused or incomplete. This was not a single mistake, it was a chain of missed chances. A missed file review led to underinformed decisions. Missed visits led to missed observations. An unverified travel plan became a blind spot. A mandatory reporter's alert produced only a brief response. The system had many doors to reach a child and confirm safety. One by one, those doors were left closed. This is not about expecting hindsight perfection. It is about following process. Monthly contact rules exist because risk can change quickly. Private interviews exist because appearances can mislead. Verification steps exist because plans discussed at a kitchen table need confirmation. When those steps are skipped, a child can fall into a space where no one is truly watching. In this case, every safeguard was a chance to step in. There were 8 such chances. Each one could have made a difference. In August 2013, Elsa Oliver moved her children into a small apartment on Kimball Street in Fitchburg. Not long after, her boyfriend, Alberto Sierra Jr., started staying there often. Soon he was running the house and taking control of daily life. Neighbors noticed the change. A young family moving in, a new man in the picture, rules inside the home becoming tighter. The last time Jeremiah, just 5 years old, was seen by extended family was September 14, 2013. The visit was tied to relatives in Connecticut. After that day, no one in the family laid eyes on him again. From then on, Jeremiah seemed to vanish from public view. There were no photos, no visits to the doctor, no school records showing he was in class. It was like he had slipped into the shadows. As autumn passed, the unease grew. Quiet worries soon turned into open concerns. In early December 2013, Jeremiah's older sister, Juliana, only 8 years old, confided in a teacher at Rangold Elementary School. She told the teacher that she hadn't seen her little brother in months. She admitted she was scared of what was happening at home. The teacher did what the law required. The information was reported through the school, and soon an official welfare check was set in motion. On December 13, 2013, Fitchburg police showed up at the Kimball Street apartment with a search warrant. Elsa answered. She claimed Jeremiah was in Florida, staying with relatives for a long visit. Police followed up immediately. They called and questioned the relatives Elsa mentioned, but those relatives said the opposite. They hadn't seen Jeremiah. They weren't caring for him. There was no trip, no arrangements, no sign of him in Florida at all. There were no tickets, no travel records, no proof of where he had gone. The story didn't add up. Investigators marked the Florida claim as untrue. Just days later, the court stepped in. On December 16th, a judge ordered Elsa to bring Jeremiah to court within 3 days. She failed to do it. She couldn't prove where her son was. That same day, Elsa was arrested on reckless endangerment charges connected to her children. Alberto Sierra faced his own charges for how he treated the siblings inside the home. By mid-December, the contradiction was clear. A mother saying her child was out of state, relatives saying he was not, and no proof anywhere that Jeremiah was still in the world outside those walls. If Jeremiah wasn't in Florida, then where was he? With no answers, investigators shifted gears. This was no longer just a welfare check. It became a full-scale search. Detectives began piecing together a timeline. They pulled school and medical records. They walked door to door in the neighborhood. Special units searched the riverbanks, woods, and empty lots around Fitchburg. Through the bitter cold winter, officers and volunteers trudged through snow, working grid by grid near the Nashua River and along hidden trails. Neighbors were questioned again and again. Some spoke about changes they noticed at the Kimball Street apartment. Windows covered in black trash bags, a home where the door rarely opened. The search widened. Investigators checked routes in and out of the city, dug into family connections, and chased every tip from the public. But months passed. Still no sign of Jeremiah. No school attendance. No visits to the doctor. No simple record of everyday life. The silence was louder than anything else. Investigators didn't stop. They chased every lead, checked names given to officers and social workers, and compared travel claims with ticket data. They traced phone records, mapped known addresses, and searched for any sign of the boy. It became clear Jeremiah was not going to simply reappear. Time was no longer on their side. Then, a break came from an unexpected source. An inmate at the Worcester County Jail gave investigators information about a location. A spot off Interstate 190 in Sterling, Massachusetts. The lead was specific enough for a focused search. On April 18, 2014, officers went out to the area. About 40 feet from the road, hidden in the brush, they found a suitcase. Inside were human remains. It was Jeremiah Oliver. The discovery site was locked down. Photographs taken. Evidence collected. Traffic slowed as the news spread. By the end of the day, reporters and residents gathered, watching as investigators processed the scene. The search was over, but the questions had only grown. Detectives documented the area carefully. Items were logged for forensic testing. Formal identification was arranged. The case shifted yet again, from finding Jeremiah to uncovering how he ended up abandoned by the roadside. The community mourned. Neighbors and classmates' families held a candlelight vigil outside the Kimball Street apartment. The sidewalk filled with flowers, toys, and handwritten notes. In early May, a public funeral was held at Rollstone Congregational Church in Fitchburg. Jeremiah Oliver was laid to rest at Hope Memorial Cemetery in Worcester. In the months that followed, the community searched for a way to keep Jeremiah's memory alive. At Kogal Park, a memorial bench was placed. It was paid for through donations from people who cared. A simple bench, but it became a place where neighbors could sit, reflect, and remember a little boy who should have had many more years ahead. If this case breaks your heart too, subscribe and share. Every time these stories are told, awareness grows and children are a little safer. After Jeremiah's remains were found in April 2014, the case moved to the office of the chief medical examiner in Massachusetts. The process followed standard forensic steps. His remains were transported under chain of custody, carefully cataloged and examined to determine cause and manner of death. But time had worked against investigators. Jeremiah had been missing for months before he was found. His body had been left outside, exposed to the natural elements. That made the medical review far more difficult. In forensic science, decomposition often erases critical details. Pathologists must then work with what is left: bones, possible markings, fibers, or anything preserved in the environment. After a long review and consultation, on February 4, 2016, the chief medical examiner released the final ruling. Jeremiah's death was classified as homicidal violence of undetermined etiology. Those words carried weight. They confirmed what no one doubted. Jeremiah's death was not an accident and not natural. Someone had taken his life. But the phrase undetermined etiology also meant that examiners could not point to one clear cause, like strangulation, blunt force trauma, or another precise method. The remains were too compromised to say. For investigators, that ruling mattered. It legally confirmed homicide. For the family and the public, it left a painful hole. There would never be an exact medical answer for how Jeremiah died, only the certainty that his life was stolen. The autopsy findings became a turning point. They gave prosecutors confirmation of homicide, strengthening the case, but at the same time, the lack of a clear cause made the path to trial harder. Without a single forensic conclusion, the case would have to lean heavily on testimony, prior abuse evidence, and circumstantial proof. Attention shifted back to the courts. In 2014, prosecutors filed charges based on what they could prove at that stage. Elsa Oliver, Jeremiah's mother, was indicted on counts tied to child endangerment of her surviving children. Alberto Sierra Jr. faced indictments for assault and related crimes tied to his actions inside the home. Across the next few years, the case moved forward in phases. In 2017, major pleas were entered. Elsa Oliver pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including assault and battery, and 2 counts of reckless endangerment. Her sentence added up to 7.5 years, spread across multiple counts. The plea placed responsibility on her for endangering her surviving children and violating her duty as a mother. That same year, Alberto Sierra Jr. also pleaded guilty, this time to multiple assaults against Elsa and the siblings. He was sentenced to 6 to 7 years in state prison, followed by a period of supervision. These convictions covered what prosecutors could prove, the abuse that survivors could testify about, supported by records and evidence. Both pleas meant there would be no trial, but they locked in findings of guilt. The crimes were on the record. Another key decision came in 2017. Prosecutors chose to withdraw certain homicide-related charges tied to Jeremiah. They explained that the choice was strategic. Dropping the charges at that moment avoided double jeopardy problems and kept the option open for a future murder case. If more evidence surfaced, it was a calculated move. By banking convictions for assaults and endangerment, prosecutors protected the surviving children and secured accountability in the short term. At the same time, they preserved the chance to pursue full homicide charges later, when they felt the case was stronger. The legal process also reached others. Alberto's brother, Christian Sierra, faced charges for perjury and misleading investigators. Detectives said his false statements slowed the search for the truth. 2 others, Ashley M. Cormier and Kay Thibarge, were also charged with misleading police during the inquiry. These cases showed how damaging false accounts can be in child abuse investigations. Lies fracture timelines, leads turn cold, and justice gets delayed. By the end of 2018, 3 things stood out. First, felony convictions against Elsa Oliver and Alberto Sierra Jr. for assault and child endangerment, proven without needing Jeremiah's medical findings. Second, obstruction charges against associates who misled police. And third, the unresolved question of who would be held responsible for Jeremiah's homicide, a question prosecutors left open by design. The strategy worked. On May 18, 2023, nearly a decade later, a Worcester County grand jury returned 2 indictments against Alberto Sierra Jr. for murder and for disinterring a body. He was arraigned the same day in Worcester Superior Court. He pleaded not guilty. The judge ordered him held without bail. A week later, his defense team asked for his release, citing rheumatoid arthritis and his involvement in a clinical trial. They argued that jail would interrupt his treatment. The court rejected that request. Sierra would remain behind bars while the case moved forward. The indictment did more than revive the homicide charge. It laid out in detail what prosecutors believed happened. They alleged that Alberto killed Jeremiah inside the Fitchburg apartment in the fall of 2013. Afraid of the consequences, he then tried to cover it up. Prosecutors said Elsa, Jeremiah's mother, helped afterward, spreading the false story that her son was in Florida with relatives. Those allegations filled in gaps that had haunted the case for years. Jeremiah's sudden absence from school, the explanations that never matched reality, the silence that stretched on for months. Investigators argued that Alberto moved Jeremiah's body more than once before finally leaving it inside a suitcase along Interstate 190, where it stayed hidden until April 2014. From this point, the courtroom story narrowed down to 2 critical arguments. The first was the medical examiner's ruling. Jeremiah's death was not natural, not accidental, but homicide. The second was the testimony and evidence pointing toward Alberto Sierra and Elsa Oliver, suggesting that they both worked to cover up the truth and avoid justice. As of August 31, 2025, no verdict has been reached. The case is still pending in Worcester Superior Court. What prosecutors have laid out are still allegations, claims that remain unproven until a jury gives its final decision. The discovery of Jeremiah's remains did not just reveal a crime inside one family, it also pulled back the curtain on the very system that was supposed to protect him. A review of the Department of Children and Families records showed something shocking. Required monthly visits to check on Jeremiah had been skipped at least 8 times. These were not casual drop-ins. They were mandatory safety checks meant to make sure he was alive, safe, and cared for. Each missed visit was a chance to save him. Each one slipped away. When the truth became public, accountability reached beyond the family. Several staff members, including Jeremiah's assigned social worker and her supervisors, were fired. In April 2014, as outrage grew, Olga Roche, the commissioner of DCF, resigned under mounting political and public pressure. The state's child protection system had failed, and the people of Massachusetts demanded answers. 2 years later, in 2016, the Child Welfare League of America completed a formal review. Their findings confirmed what so many already believed. There had been neglect, mishandling, and serious mismanagement within the agency. Still, they stopped short of directly blaming the department for Jeremiah's death. The painful truth was clear. The violence that ended Jeremiah's life happened inside his home, but systemic gaps gave that violence space to go unseen. The lessons from this case reached far beyond government offices. Parents, teachers, neighbors, everyone was reminded of the same truth. Trust your instincts. If a child disappears from school for weeks, if their behavior suddenly shifts, if the answers you hear don't feel right, speak up. Silence allows danger to grow. Looking away, hesitating, or hoping someone else will act can cost a child their life. Vigilance, reporting, and persistence are not optional. They are a duty. Today, Jeremiah Oliver's story is remembered not only as a personal tragedy, but as a symbol of institutional failure and the desperate need for change. His name is tied to reforms, investigations, and reforms within Massachusetts's child protection system. His short life became the reason policies were re-examined, the reason people demanded more from those sworn to protect children. In Fitchburg, a memorial bench stands in his honor. It is a quiet place where neighbors can sit, reflect, and remember the little boy who should have grown up, laughed, and lived a full life. It is a reminder not only of what was lost, but of what must always be protected. Jeremiah's case continues in the courts, but his story already carries a legacy, a call to never look away, to never stay silent, and to never let another child's suffering go unseen. If Jeremiah's story moved you, share it. Every view, every comment, every share keeps his memory alive, and awareness saves lives. Subscribe now and join a community that refuses to forget the children who needed us most.